Good morning, I'm Hassan Emergency Dean of the Hair College of Business. It is my honor to introduce our president, a visionary and energetic leader who is guiding the institution through a period of remarkable transformation for both NKU and higher ed in general. Dr. Kelly Thompson has served as the 7th president of NKU since October 2023. Previously, she has enjoyed 25 years in higher education as a professor and academic leader. She served as the provost at Hope College from 2017 to 2021 and dean of the University of Cincinnati Blue Ash College from 2010 to 2017. From 1996 to 2010, she served NKU as a professor of communication, graduate program director, and department chair. Dr. Thompson earned her PhD in 1997 from the University of Cincinnati. Under her leadership, NKU has reached several key milestones that reflect not only strong institutional stewardship, but also commitment to student success, employee empowerment, and regional engagement. In June, the Board of Regents approved a balanced operating budget for 25-26 fiscal year, just 2 years after the university faced a $24 million deficit. This accomplishment speaks volumes about the resilience of the entire campus community, as well as the steady leadership of President Thompson. She is also leading the NKU's new strategic plan, Forward Together, led by purpose, driven by people, which charts a bold and unified vision of advancing student success, supporting our colleagues, and enhancing the region through innovation and collaboration. Enrollment is showing positive momentum, with increase in first-year students, thanks to initiatives like Direct Admit and the 3 states one-rate tuition model. And we are seeing substantial gains in student retention, on track to exceed our previous institution record. Please join me in welcoming President Thompson, a dedicated leader who is not only shaping the future of NKU, but making sure that the future is grounded in purpose, opportunity, and community.
Well, I'm really glad I came for that lovely introduction. I think that might be the nicest thing I've heard in a long time. Hassan, thank you. What a beautiful way to start the day. Not just the introduction, but to be here with you. Welcome to our 3rd annual Midsummer Symposium. I think that you are all in for a treat. I want to welcome those of you who are new to NKU, to the university. I'm so happy to have you here. I think that NKU on its best days has people from our whole region here with us, learning and growing together. I also want to say welcome to our Hale College of Business, one of our incredible colleges that's so engaged in the region in so many different ways. You will learn more about how we're engaged and how we excel in the research that we do today. So thank you to our dean, who has done a marvelous job with his colleagues leading our way forward. So we're delighted to lead this new incredible opportunity, just to have so many people here for years after years of economic analysis and development. This is an incredible center, and you're going to just learn so much together today. We are a regional comprehensive university, and I like to say that we're unapologetically regional here at NKU. And this event is one of many ways that NKU demonstrates our commitment to the region. We're committed to public engagement, and we're committed to being good stewards of place. So we're so pleased to have each of you here today. I know that a lot of you will engage and meet new friends today and learn new things today that will help us to do our work better together. Before we begin, though, I want to extend a sincere thanks to OneNKY Alliance for sponsoring this year's symposium. Won't you join me in thanking them? Their continued investment in convening leaders and organizations across our region exemplifies the kind of cross-sector collaboration that helps communities move forward. We are grateful for their partnership and shared commitment to data-informed progress. We're also happy to have several elected officials here on campus with us today. Senator Shelley Funky Frohmeyer is here with us, Mayor Paul Meyer, Mayor Brian Haney, and Mayor Jim Hamburg are all here. Won't you thank them for their incredible service? Thank you. Events like this symposium represent one of the things that NKU does best, serving as a stewardship place by connecting research to action and bringing people together who are making a difference in our region. Through CIAD, we are proud to provide the kind of independent, trusted economic analysis that helps leaders in business, government, and nonprofits to make more informed decisions. This morning's gathering brings together a diverse group of stakeholders, employers, community leaders, educators, and policymakers to discuss the issues that are shaping Northern Kentucky and the broader Cincinnati metropolitan region. Whether the conversation is about workforce readiness, infrastructure planning, consumer trends, or economic development strategy, we all share a common goal: building a more vibrant and resilient economy here in Northern Kentucky and the broader region. At NKU, we see it as part of our mission to fuel that growth through research, education, and collaboration, and not to mention workforce alignment. CIAD plays a critical role in that mission by providing insight into the trends that matter most to our communities, from employment shifts and demographic changes to educational outcomes and business development opportunities. I also want to take a moment to thank the faculty, the students, and the staff here at the university, great folks like Janet Hara, who contribute to this work. Their talent and dedication to make events like this happen, they reflect the spirit of service that defines NKU's role in this region. We're especially proud that our students have opportunities to engage in applied research and data-driven problem solving through initiatives like CIAD. So we have a lot to do this morning, folks, so let's get to it. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, President Fort Thomas. Can you all hear me okay? Yes. All right. Last year you told me I didn't talk loud enough, so I'm going to try to correct that this year. So, let's get started. So first of all, thank you all for coming this morning. We really appreciate it. I also wanted to thank, once again, thank OneNKY Alliance for sponsoring this morning's program. We really appreciate the community support. We couldn't do our work without that community support. So why did we choose the topic this morning that we chose? So we're going to talk about industry clusters. There's a couple of reasons we looked at them. One, I wanted to see if our industry clusters had changed pre and post pandemic. That was a question I wanted to look at. But I also had heard a lot about this concept of the Corridor of Commerce project. And I wanted to see what was it about, what potential is there, and what kind of data we could put around it to inform more and move that concept forward. So it had kind of a dual purpose for this project. The Corridor of Commerce project, it is a regional collaboration as an economic concept, as an economic catalyst for regions. And the white paper outlined a very bold vision for the Corridor of Commerce, connecting a variety of metropolitan areas. And it highlighted the fact that we have a lot of market access advantages in the Midwest. So we put some geography around it. We defined the region as encompassing 6 metropolitan areas, starting to the north of Columbus, going south to Dayton, Cincinnati, Louisville, Memphis, and Nashville. And it has about 300 unique counties, and with the rest being outlying counties. And then one of the things we talk about is why is this region important? When we look at it's in a very strategic location. Within that corridor, you can reach over half the U.S. population in a one-day truck drive. And it has a lot of logistical advantages because up and down this corridor, we have a lot of crucial infrastructure. You can move goods and services by rail, air, water, over the road. We have almost every transportation mode you can imagine we have in this corridor. And you'll see when we look at clusters that are important, that this infrastructure is one of the reasons that we have the clusters here that we do. I know this graph's kind of hard to read, it's kind of messy, but I just want to put Cincinnati in context of how do we fit into that corridor. Based on size, looking at employment, population, income, and GDP, we rank second. If we look at growth rates, we rank about fourth. That's not surprising. We know that population growth rates is one of the challenges we face in our region. We are not a fast-growing metro area. And Cincinnati contributes about 12% of the corridor. So with that, let's talk about how we identify the clusters. We'll do the methodology part very quickly, I promise, and then we'll get to the meat of it. So we started out with those two types of clusters. There's traded clusters. These are industries that buy and sell goods outside of our market. Then we have local clusters that basically serve the local industry and the local population. The largest local cluster we have would be healthcare, for example. And what you'll see as we go through this morning is the traded clusters are bringing in the dollars that are supporting our local clusters. So that's why traded clusters are important. They're also important because unlike local clusters that need population growth, by and large, just expand, traded clusters don't need a lot of population growth in order to continue to expand. So when we talk about what's the additional economic significance of these traded clusters, they tend to have higher wages, as we will see. Some of them substantially higher wages, 40 and 50% higher on average. They are where we get enhanced innovation. These are the clusters that are generating new technology and commercializing new technology. And they have a lot of export potential. Some of these industries we will show you are exporting billions of dollars every year outside of the United States. And they have a lot of specialized infrastructure. So we have a lot of development of specialized infrastructure and talent pipelines. So what was the criteria? What constitutes a cluster? We have looked at 6 different criteria. One is how big is it in terms of employment. It has to have at least 5,000 jobs or 6,000 jobs here in the metro area and $49,000 in the corridor before we would consider it a cluster. And we were looking for those. There's lots of clusters that have low wages. We were interested in catalyzing those that have high wages. So we were looking for clusters that have an average annual wage of $66,000 or more per year. And we were looking for what they call a location quotient of greater than 125. Location quotient is a fancy way of saying, is that industry more important in your market than it is nationally? So for example, if manufacturing is 10% of the national economy, and it's 20% of Cincinnati's economy, you divide those two and you get a location quotient of 2. So it would mean it's twice as important here as it is nationally. So we're looking for those that are at least 25% more important here than they are nationally. And these are the last 3 things we looked at is, does this cluster have the capacity for employment growth? We don't want to look for those clusters that are either stagnant or declining. We do have one exception we'll talk about. And then the business type. When I say business type, what I'm saying is this an industry that's growing not just locally, but nationally? If it's not growing nationally, but we're capturing market share in a declining industry, that's not a long-term solution. And then again, are we grabbing market share or are we losing market share? And I think if you look at these quantitative thresholds, and if we meet those criteria, that pretty much ensures that these clusters have sufficient scale, they have quality jobs, and they have the demonstration that they can grow and catalyze the economy going forward. Once we were done, we categorized the clusters we identified into 3 groups. What we call our star clusters. These are ones that have a lot of jobs, they pay well, and they're growing fast. We have what we call emerging clusters, which are identified one that's very important to our region. That is, it's not a big concentration yet, but it's been growing fast. One of the clusters we've identified doubled their employment in the last 10 years. So that's pretty good growth. And then we have legacy clusters, manufacturing being the largest and most notable. They have lots of employees, they pay above average wages. So we're probably never going to grow as fast as some of these others because they're mature industries already. But we're still grabbing market share and there's still growth opportunities for us in that space. So what did we identify? We identified 5 strategic clusters that we think the community should really try to invest some dollars in and try to catalyze. Life sciences, transportation and logistics, advanced manufacturing, and we will talk about, we identified several subsectors within manufacturing, we're very competitive. Aerospace and aviation, and wholesale trade. Wholesale trade is not one you typically see on a list of target clusters, but when we get to that, I think you'll see why. I'll give you a little preview. The average annual wage in wholesale trade is approaching $90,000 a year. And it's one of the fastest growing clusters in our region as well. So we want to take a look at it. We have 2 key clusters in common with the entire corridor. That's advanced manufacturing and transportation and logistics. So with that, we've identified 5 clusters that we think represent economic engines and they're strategically positioned for growth in the future. So the rest of the presentation is going to be providing you some industry profiles. In addition to providing you with key economic indicators like employment and GDP and things like that and growth trends, we've also conducted an economic contribution analysis for each industry. One of the questions I get every year is, why do you do the symposium? Well, every year in January, we pick a research topic that we think is relevant to the community's economic future. And it provides us an opportunity to provide experiential learning for our students, to do research that they would not normally do in the classroom. So Dylan did all the work on this project. He did shift share analysis, he did the economic contribution analysis. Typically, students don't see this until they're in a PhD program. So it gives us an opportunity to give them some instructions outside of the classroom on research capacity. So we were real pleased to have him help us on this project. The other thing you're going to see on these clusters, all 5 of these target clusters, is they generate significant tax revenues for the state and local governments. And the other thing you're going to see is they are the ones that are providing a lot of demand, generating a lot of demand for other sectors outside of their cluster itself. Excuse me, I need a drink of water. So let's start off with the first cluster, which is life sciences. So this is just how we defined it. I'm not going to read it, but there's those of us that data geeks in with it would like to see it. But life sciences, it's both a manufacturing component, a distribution component, very important distribution component, and then a research component. So when we look at life sciences trends, overall, in the last 10 years, all jobs increased by 10%. Life sciences increased by more than double at 21.3%. So we now have about just under 19,000 life science occupations in the metro area. So it is a rapidly growing sector. This is the part we really care about, is the wage growth. The nominal wage growth over the last 10 years was 71%. Adjusted for inflation, that was a 31% increase in average annual wages in this space. And as of 2024, the average annual wage in this space is $104,000. So this is a very high paid wage, and it's growing rapidly. It's employing a lot of people. This is one of the things I thought was interesting. I'm sure Dave Knox is going to join us for our panel discussion. Dave will probably talk about this a bit. But when we asked about, what demonstrates that this is actually going to continue to grow as a space for us, 11 of the top 25 best funded startups in the Cincinnati metro area are in the life science spaces. We're also building a lot of specialized infrastructure, such as the wet lab in Covington, to support the growth of the life sciences space. So I think this is just the start of growth in this sector. This is the top 10 occupations ranked by the number of jobs in the life science space. It's an interesting dichotomy. There are a lot of technician jobs in this space that require a bachelor's degree, and there are a lot of jobs at the top that require a PhD or a doctorate, and not much else, which is reflected in the wages. And if you look at the average annual wages for those same top 10 occupations, you can see that the wages range from about $50,000 to over $106,000. So these are median wages. The first one we showed you is average. This is the median. So there's a lot of opportunity in this space, not just for those that have a doctorate, but lots of others for the bachelor's level. The other thing that we're seeing is the trend in here from a workforce development perspective. a lot of requirements for new certificates and certifications in addition to the bachelor's degree. You would think of life sciences as a particularly robust export. We don't have data for metro areas, we only have data for state levels. But just to give you an example, in last year in Kentucky, we exported $3.7 billion worth of life sciences, pharmaceuticals and medicines out of the state. So what is the economic contribution of this industry, this sector, to our overall metro area? So those of you who haven't seen an economic contribution analysis before, most of you have seen an economic impact analysis. It's very, very similar. And it's basically asking the question, how much does this entity, whether it's a company, an institution, or an industry, contribute to the overall regional economy? And we're going to talk about three types of impacts. There's the direct impact, so how much is the company itself spending, or the industry itself spending. So that's payroll, capital investment, the purchases of inputs, and obviously life sciences, R&D is a very important expenditure category as well. Indirect impacts, that's just B2B purchases. So you'll see in all of these clusters, they are buying a lot of goods and services from other businesses in the area, particularly the professional services. And then the induced impact is those employees of the companies that are in the life science space, in turn spend their wages at other industries in the economy. And so you get, that's the induced, so that's how the household spending matters. That's why we care about having high wage jobs, not only to help the individual, but also ensures that more companies outside of that cluster benefit from the presence of that cluster. So this is kind of a quick summary. So while we have 18,200 direct jobs in the life sciences cluster, when you take into account the indirect and induced impacts, it's supporting directly and indirectly roughly 44,000 jobs in the region. It has a labor income that's helping generate about 3.9 billion. Value added and industry outputs. I always have to get a cheat sheet because I can never remember which one's which. Output is the total value of goods and services produced by the industry. Value added is the difference between total output and the cost of intermediate inputs. I always tell people to think of value added as GDP. It's kind of, it's the closest analogy I can find. And so when you look at the value added, it's contributing about $6.2 billion to the regional GDP. When we ask what are the other industries that are most impacted, you're going to see this list does not change much across, but one of the things that you see very consistently is it's supporting real estate, both commercial and residential. The residential through payroll, the commercial through building infrastructure and capital investments. And then the other one you will see almost on every list will be hospitals in the management of companies and professional business services. Fiscal impacts. I know our elected officials always like to see if we can generate any money for them. So this is the annual impact you can expect from this sector. In total, it's about $1.2 billion. Of that, about $225 billion is for to go to the state. About $129 billion would come to, or $129 million, excuse me, would come to the county. And then to cities and special districts, it's about $33 million per year. So overall, one of the things that makes the life sciences not only does it have a very high wage, it supports a lot of jobs, but it has a big multiplier effect. So for every job in the life sciences space, it's supporting or creating another 1.4 jobs in the rest of the economy in Cincinnati. So that is a very high multiplier. You will see that life sciences and aviation and aerospace have the highest multiplier impacts. So now let's move to advanced manufacturing. Again, for the data folks, I've got the NAICS codes there for you. We actually have, we looked at manufacturing, advanced manufacturing in whole, but I don't have these presented this morning, we'd be here too long if I did, but we do have additional data on food manufacturing and flavoring, which that does include our bourbon industry, and paper manufacturing, chemical manufacturing, and transportation equipment manufacturing. These are manufacturing specialties for our region. And transportation equipment manufacturing includes two things. It includes aviation parts, and it includes automotive. So those are the two things that are in that transportation equipment. Again, we've seen a good growth, but you don't see the same rate of growth. We're going to talk just a second about why we don't see the same rate of job growth we've seen in life sciences. Again, it's a mature industry in comparison to life sciences. We're still beating the average. Overall, jobs have increased about 10% over the last 10 years. Advanced manufacturing increased to just under 14%. Wage growth, and whether nominal or adjusted, is about the same as all jobs. But again, it starts at a much higher average annual median wage at about $87,000, which is about, that's about $25,000 more per year on average than the average of all jobs. I know I didn't turn myself off. Can you hear me? Okay. Is this one?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll use that. I'll try to speak up. So, the thing with advanced manufacturing is that it provides very high quality jobs in terms of wages. When we look at, this is some work that Dr. Abdul Alvarani has done, and he wrote about it in his newsletter a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, I'm gonna steal that from him. But it really explains what's happening in our manufacturing sector. We see this across the country. We don't seem to see a lot of job growth in manufacturing, but yet our output continues to grow very healthily. And it's because if we compare ourselves, United States to China, our output per hour is 3 times that of the average Chinese worker. So we truly are doing more with fewer people. And I think it's really important that manufacturing is not a diminishing sector in terms of output. It's just not as labor intensive as it used to be. And this graph illustrates that for our metro area. When we look at all industries, jobs grew by about 14%, and this is over a 20-year period. Manufacturing jobs are down about 14%. But when you look at GDP, the orange bars, even in the face of declining employment, the output for manufacturing sector is up 40%, and these are adjusted for inflation. So it's still a very rapidly growing industry, but they're just doing more with fewer people. They're doing more with fewer people through automation and AI. These are some of the top industries or top jobs ranked by a number of jobs in this space. A lot of assemblers, inspectors, a wide variety of skilled tradespeople in the manufacturing sector. And again, you see relatively high median annual wages. You see some that are in that 40,000 range, but an awful lot of them are above that 50,000 mark. In exports, this is an export winner for us. Last year, we exported $18.9 billion just in aerospace products and parts, just in that one sector alone. When we look at the economic contribution, and we look at the number of jobs that manufacturing supports, directly it has 122,000 jobs, but it's supporting 335,000 jobs throughout the economy. Labor income of $29.5 billion. Oh, you gonna bring me another one? Thank you. How about service? Thank you. And it's generating GDP of about $55.4 billion a year. And when we look at who is impacting, one of these, we talk about why did we pick wholesale trade? Well, we'll see why. And this is the first clue is why wholesale trade is important. The industry that benefits the most from manufacturing is wholesale trade. And when we look at tax revenues, for the state, it's about $2.1 billion per year. For the county, it's about $322 million per year. And for the cities and special districts, it's about $1.3 billion per year. So it generates a lot of tax revenue for our local communities. So here's kind of a contribution now, or kind of a snapshot for us. And again, you see that high multiplier effect of, for every job that we generate in manufacturing, we're supporting another 1.7 jobs in the rest of the economy. And I think you will see that really advanced manufacturing is one of the backbones of our local economy. It is the economy that's bringing in the most money and the most capital investment that is catalyzing the growth in the rest of our economy. And aerospace and aviation is kind of an interesting cluster because it's part manufacturing. We talked about earlier that one of our biggest exports is aerospace products and parts and automotive parts. Also a transportation component. Because of the airport at CBG, with DHL and Amazon Prime, we do a lot of work in the aerospace, and particularly on the cargo side. We're one of the largest cargo airports in North America. We'll have to ask Larry to confirm, but I think that we are now the 6th largest airport in terms of cargo in North America.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. And over the last 10 years, it's interesting, when we look at the 20-year period, we've been losing jobs in manufacturing. But when we look at the aerospace and aviation sector, over the last 10 years, the number of jobs has increased by 28.5%. So this is really a kind of one of our star clusters within that manufacturing and transportation space. It is supporting about 19,000 jobs in the economy. Good wages. The wages are going about the same as jobs overall, but again, you're starting with a much higher average annual wage. And I think a lot of us think of transportation and aerospace as the warehouse jobs out of Amazon. As you're going to see when we look at the top occupations, that is not the major players in this space. The major players in this space are engineers. And I'm sorry, Bob wasn't there. Let's say, Bob, I put that in just for you. But the largest employment base in this space is industrial engineers. You also see aerospace engineers and materials engineers. So a lot of engineers are working in this space. And again, you can see the very high median wages in this space. And again, when we look at exports, almost 19 billion from Kentucky alone, another 6.5 billion from Ohio of aerospace products and parts are being exported out of our states every year. A lot of specialized infrastructure and investments are happening in this space. Obviously, we are very lucky we have CDG. One of the things we were very fortunate is that CDG, the powers that be in the early years thought enough to make sure we had the land around CDG, and so we had space to develop. Where I think, Larry, one of our newest is the Hangar Row, right?
Yes.
We're also building a very extensive manufacturing network. And as you'll see when we get to the end, we have built the full pipeline here, from bringing in goods and services and parts to the manufacturing to the distribution. We have built out that full supply chain here in our metro area. We've had several recent investments of note. GE Aerospace, for example, is putting $100 million in their facilities in Cincinnati. And DHL is currently putting about $300 million in their facilities at the airport. So we're seeing some significant capital investment in these industries. I always like when these industries put in extensive capital investment. It's easy to move people, it's a lot harder to move capital investment. So what is the economic contribution of aerospace? Again, about 19,000 jobs, which you see they're supporting directly and through the induced expenditures, about 50,000 jobs in the region, with a value added of about $8.4 billion every year. And again, you see that owner-occupied housing, hospitals, and management companies. These, you'll see over and over, you guys want to make friends with these people because they are your best generator of demand. Fiscal impacts, a lot of fiscal impacts because of a lot of capital investments, a lot of property taxes are generated for the state in this space. So it's about $339 million per year for the state, $199 million for the counties, and $52 million for cities and special districts in our region. So overall, very high multiplier effect. For every job in the aerospace and aviation sector, we're supporting and creating another 1.6 jobs in the rest of the economy. And if you think about it, it has about the same number of direct jobs as life sciences, but it has twice the multiplier impact because it's so capital intensive. It supports a lot of other industries in the region. I was surprised, given how much infrastructure we've been building around this space, that construction wasn't one of the top 10 beneficiaries. Now to transportation and logistics. These are all the categories that are included. So it's air, rail, water, truck, pipeline distribution, and then all of the logistics consulting services that are required to make all those systems work. And there's a reason that we are such an important transportation and logistics hub. It's because we do have all these various nodes of transportation. This is not something that every metropolitan area in the country has. And we are very fortunate to have all these various modes of transportation here. So here's your job growth, folks. The number of jobs in this space doubled in the last 10 years. We went from 32,000 to 64,000. So when we talk about an industry that's creating jobs, this is it. Now, this does not have, the wages are not as high. The average wage is about 63,000, which doesn't quite meet our 66 target, or 62 target. We wanted to be a little bit above, but just given the sheer number of jobs and the importance that this sector has in supporting manufacturing and supporting other industry sectors, we can't ignore it. And one of the questions I get a lot is, does transportation logistics include warehousing? It does. But we are a strategic multimodal logistics hub. I think I'm always surprised when I look at the CPG numbers. We had 9.2 million passengers going in and out of CPG last year. They're carrying almost 2 million tons of cargo every year. So it's a very strategic asset for us. DHL is obviously a hub, international hub. We're delivering to 6 continents from DHL. And so we have a lot of historical synergies with our manufacturing space when you think about how long P&G and GE have been in our region. When we look at the jobs, it's a wide variety of jobs that are important to this sector, from managers and operations to stockers and order fillers. So it's a very, very wide mix of jobs in this sector. And again, you see lots of differences in pay. This sector has the widest disparity in pay rates. Economic contribution, directly it's about 63,000 jobs. It's supporting about 106,000 jobs in our market with a value add of about $10.4 billion every year. And if it doubles again, that would be quite impressive. Again, you see what industries are supporting: real estate, hospitals, and professional services. That's a pretty consistent theme across. Tax revenues, again, we look at the state, 426 million per year, 245 million for the counties, and about 63 million for cities and special districts in our region. And it has a lower multiplier effect, but it's nevertheless important because we cannot maintain our aerospace and aviation and our manufacturing sectors without the transportation and logistics sector. They go hand in hand. We need both. So wholesale trade. At first blush, you're going to say there's no jobs in wholesale trade, and we're going to talk to you about how we defined it. So there's 3 big sectors. There's durable goods wholesaling, non-durable goods wholesaling, and then electronic markets, agents, and brokers. And we're going to see that the jobs are very, very different across these 3 subsectors. So overall, wholesale trade has not really moved much at all in the last 10 years. But the number of durable goods wholesale trade jobs have increased by nearly 5,700 jobs in that 10-year space. Agents and brokers are down primarily because, just like the manufacturing sector, they are automating those processes and those positions away. Because a lot of it is paperwork, and they're automating it away with AI. But again, I think when you look at the growth rates, the durable goods are up 20% over the last 10 years. It's the other 2 subsectors that are not doing as well. But that durable goods, which is going along with our manufacturing and our transportation logistics sector, is why we want to focus on this. The other reason we want to focus on it is there's some very important people that work in this sector that we want to keep in our market. First of all, the average annual wage in this sector is $88,500 per year. Everybody, when we looked at this, I had Dylan check this number about 5 times. So are you sure it's that high? And it is. And we're like, who's working in the sector they're paying that kind of wages? And then we found out who's working in it. These are all our salespeople. When we look at who's working in there, we'll get to that. It's salespeople. It's people that are out buying and selling goods and services across companies in our region. So the other thing Karen asked me is, well, who are these companies? I don't know. I can't think of a single wholesale company. The 2 that most people have heard of, you've probably heard of a small company called Cintas. And there's another group called Hummel Group, and they have all kinds of different subsidiaries that are engaging in the wholesale trade in our region. Again, you can see the differences in wages across the durable and non-durable, and how fast they're growing in durable goods. One of the things I talk about is the wholesale trade is very integral to moving products and services, because you need a lot of specialized logistics services to move certain types of goods and services. Consumer packaged goods, you need people that are really good with multi-channel distribution. Think about a store they're doing in-store, web, the last mile delivery from the store. They need people that can do that promotional, system delivery. But when you look at the life science distribution, there's a couple things that pop out there. One, they need people that really understand compliance and the regulations. Lots of regulations around moving pharmaceuticals around the country internationally. But you also need temperature control for a lot of this product and equipment. And you need chain of custody documentation. So you need some very specialized logistic talent to do that kind of work. And in the automotive, but also it's also just equally true in the aerospace products and parts manufacturing, you need just-in-time delivery expertise, which again goes back to why is that transportation system so important in our region. And again, this is where you see the top 10 occupations. It's people that are selling. It's our salespeople. So that's who's working in this industry. And you can see they make pretty good money. You got kids that are looking for something to do, they might think about sales. They could do worse to make a good living. I say this because we have a sales program, COD and my DC. So when we look at the economic contribution of the wholesale trade, again, we're supporting a lot of jobs. Directly, it's about 53,000 jobs. Through the indirect and induced impacts, it's supporting about 140,000 jobs in our market, generating about $23 billion in GDP every year. Again, real estate, professional services, we see this with every graph. Tax revenues, again, pretty hefty tax revenues for our cities and counties. So when you look at state and local tax revenues, it's about $2.4 billion every year. It's generating about $39 billion in output. It's supporting 140,000 jobs. And it has one of the, surprisingly, you would think, it has one of the highest multiplier effects of all the clusters. For every job in the wholesale trade, we're supporting 1.6 jobs in the rest of the economy, primarily transportation, distribution, and manufacturing. So you can see at the top that this really is a cluster network. And these 5 clusters, they are creating a virtuous cycle. They are feeding demand into one another. And at the same time, they are feeding demand into all of our local clusters and supporting through taxes a lot of the quality of life that we enjoy in Northern Kentucky and Greater Cincinnati. So it is a cluster network that's fueling our economic growth. I think there's probably some next steps on research that could be done to make this a more robust analysis. I'd like to see some deeper dives in workforce analysis. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn. I already did a deep dive analysis for life sciences for the president's office. But I think we can learn a lot about what skill shortages are likely to see the next 10 years and what are making sure that our education and training system is aligned with those industry needs. I think another deep dive that we can do is looking at a competitor analysis. Who are we competing with in these 5 spaces? And are we competing well with them? And then doing a technology scanning. Certainly in manufacturing and transportation logistics, there's going to be a lot of new technology, a lot of industry disruption from AI. So we want to make sure that we're at the front end of that change so that we don't get left behind. So we want to know what those upcoming technologies are. Another one I imagine, Larry, you might think about talking about in your remarks is, unmanned aircraft, those types of things. Before I close, I want to say a couple special thank yous. Ashley Drummond is over here from BNKY. While we had data for Cincinnati, we didn't have the data we needed, all the data we needed for the other metro areas we wanted to look at in the corridor. Ashley very kindly provided that for us. So we really appreciate that, Ashley. And again, I want to acknowledge all the work that Dylan did. He did all the economic contribution analysis work in this presentation. So thank you both. so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the important people, starting with Karen Finan, who is going to be the moderator for our panel and industry discussion. She's the president and CEO of OneNKY Alliance.
Gina, do we get to make the questions?
We will do question and answers throughout when we're doing the panel discussion. So yes, you'll have opportunity to ask questions. Karen, this is working on your set or for the hand?
Well, thank you, Janet, and welcome to everyone. Can you hear me in the back? Am I coming through okay? Great. So I don't have slides, so I'll push that away here. And thanks again for such an insightful, thought-provoking presentation. I think we've come to expect that from NKUCAD and their leader, Janet Hara. All these years, the data points that have been brought forward. And I just want to put a plug in for the next steps that Janet identified up front. These things come with costs in terms of the studies, et cetera. So as we look at what the next steps are, how can we lather this data? I'll be working with Janet to find sponsors for those studies because we think they're very important, and the information that is utilized helps us to create our next steps, our new phase of growth. Always be selling wholesale goods. Yes. But with that, I wanted to acknowledge Janet and all her work here through the years in Northern Kentucky. Janet, you're more than just a data point. You have moved the region forward, and we have a small mural from James Villager of Boone, Kenton, and Campbell to present to you in recognition. Thank you. So with that, I'd like to invite our panelists to come up, and we certainly appreciate their presence today. Larry Krauter, the new leader of CBG, who is in from a late flight, and we certainly appreciate your attendance. Dave Knox, leader of BlueNorth, who knocked it out of the park with his recent presentation to the Kentucky legislature as part of NKY United on the entrepreneurial side. Also want to acknowledge a couple of OneNKY board members here. Bob Heil, past chair of the OneNKY Alliance, just recently past chair. And then also, of course, Larry is a OneNKY board member as well. I've known Janet for many years, and we collaborated with her and the CAD team on a number of different data options. And the data output that comes from NKUCAD often drives very specific initiatives, or it puts to rest an urban myth. And that's one of the things I like when I think about the work here. We were really pleased to support and sponsor this program today. When we learned of Janet's interest, we were immediately intrigued because it coincides with several initiatives like the Corridor of Commerce active in the market. We knew it would be top-notch, and we also knew that it would benefit many other organizations with work underway. That's part of the cross-sell, cross-market mentality we have through the OneNKY Alliance partnerships. There are a number of things underway where we co-brand, cross-sell. As you can see, Janet's allowed me to put up a banner on our October 22nd OneNKY Summit that will focus on the community roadmap through the use of her data and the guidance of our lead economic development organizations, BNKY and RED. So why is this important to Northern Kentucky? We've just sat through some pretty intensive data and deep dive into these industry sectors. Our community is in a new phase of growth, our next phase of growth. Northern Kentucky and the region at large is driving progress through a diverse industry base and plans for a shared narrative that will promote business, tourism, and talent attraction. Over the past several years, collectively, we have eliminated a number of obstacles and scaled opportunities that benefit our greatest asset, the people of Northern Kentucky. We recently co-located at the OneNKY growth organizations into the OneNKY Center. We're about 70% occupied. I think by mid-August, we will all be over there. The intent was to move the growth organizations under one roof so that we could be strategically aligned and move this community forward. We're using our voice in Frankfurt to advance policy and infrastructure through the OneNKY Frankfurt facility. This is co-working and event space customized for Northern Kentucky. And since its opening in 2020, probably hundreds of events and thousands of business and community leaders have utilized this facility to access policymakers, decision makers on the policy and infrastructure needs of our community. It's created a new dynamic for our community. We are present and we are branded together with a unified voice. Unity, health, education, in partnership with many in this room. So it's time to embolden our new phase of growth, our next phase of growth, through the creation of a community roadmap. This is our theme for the October 22nd OneNKY Summit, and we certainly invite all of you to attend because we will be building on the research that Janet has presented and what you will hear from our panelists today. Key components of this next phase that we see: leveraging our industry sectors. Where is growth coming from within our community? And how do we support organic, existing, and new industries? Do we know who is here and how to support them? The CED data, and again, the Economic Development Organization guidance, will lead the implementation of this. Second layer of the community roadmap, co-investing through a capital strategy. In my time in Northern Kentucky, I don't remember a time where we have banded together to identify priorities and align our goals to truly support our industry needs, our community needs, and the needs of our people. This is an opportunity for us to do this. And finally, but probably most important, measuring those driving factors, those community needs. How do we collectively hold ourselves accountable for what we are doing? Over the past years, your OneNKY organizations have banded together in working groups. We've aligned, we've identified priorities, and we're pushing the needle forward in things like housing, transportation and mobility, health, education, and many others. But it's collectively that we're doing this work, and collectively we are using our voice. The CED research presented today will have a firm impact on the direction we're taking. And it's my hope that the next series of data points and research that comes out of CED will help us even move further. The devil is in the detail, as you heard from Janet earlier. We want this community to have access to that data, which opens up a whole other topic with AI and the opportunity we have within this community. But our panel is here today to dive into these questions. And Larry, I'm going to start with you to help set the stage. You certainly bring a unique perspective on your industry. What stood out the most from the presentation that aligns with trends or challenges you are seeing in your sector?
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everybody. I think for us, we're very interested at CBG in what's going on in the aerospace sector, particularly right now as Boeing is continuing to restore its production rates. That is having a very beneficial impact on the supply chain and obviously at GE. And I was in conversation with one of the supply chain experts when I was in Washington, D.C. This week. And we were talking about the fact that GE and a number of aerospace tier 1 and tier 2 very large scale suppliers kind of engaged at the behest of Boeing years ago on a program to really squeeze these supply chain partners. And to the point where many supply chain partners were weakened to the extent that they were really struggling to stay afloat. You saw that with Spirit Aerosystems, where Boeing actually had to literally get back involved with the company to stabilize it so that they could continue to produce fuselages. And I think the takeaway from that, and I think where we have opportunity in terms of where Janet's research is leading us, is that as that supply chain ecosystem continues to be made healthier because of the reversal now of the larger tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers, that we have an opportunity to kind of come alongside that industry in our region and begin to figure out ways in which we can attract those supply chain partners or strengthen existing supply chain partners and continue to build this cluster. As Janet's research pointed out, obviously the jobs that are created in this sector are the kind of jobs that we want to have in this community and that we need in this region in order for us to thrive. So I think one of the biggest takeaways is the fact that there's new attention on the supply chain in aerospace. We have what I believe in our region to be a very unique value proposition for aerospace, and I'm not sure that we've taken it as far as we can. And so part of the efforts that we will be making in subsequent efforts that Janet's talking about, our own efforts will be to take a much deeper dive into the supply chain and start to determine what companies would benefit by our value proposition here in our region, and begin to identify those companies and go hunting very aggressively. And that includes a very significant change to our positioning in trade shows, for example, such as Paris Air Show, Farnborough Air Show, Dubai, Singapore, other places that we need to go and have a presence. And recently I had an opportunity to meet our governor early on in my tenure, and right away I said, Governor, when I was in Farnborough at the air show last summer, I went looking for the Kentucky Pavilion, and there wasn't one. We need to fix that, and we need to fix it quickly and aggressively. We must be present in order to win, as I like to say. And so that will be some of the things that we're going to be focusing on. But I think what's really encouraging is that we have a great story to tell. We have a very good value proposition to offer because of the ecosystem that is currently here, but also because of the transportation infrastructure that Janet alluded to. So a lot of really good takeaways from my perspective, and it's not unique just to aerospace. I think there's some really interesting connectivity across these sectors that Janet has identified that we can continue to work to maximize the job creation and investment occurring in our region around now.
So Larry, while you have the mic, I mean, corridor of commerce crosses multi-markets. It requires collaboration across many MSAs. In your view, through your sector, how possible is this?
Great question. It's definitely possible. There's been some efforts that have been underway in the past few years between CVG and our local economic development organizations like OneNKY, READY, and the corresponding airports and economic development organizations in Dayton and Louisville. And there is definitely a sense amongst the metros that we have a value proposition in the corridor, and that we have an opportunity to position ourselves geographically and as a brand in the global economy, maybe a little bit differently and more cooperatively. And so I've been talking about it like the top of the funnel, and to begin to present ourselves regionally in a way that we can take advantage of the opportunities in defense, obviously aerospace and aviation, life sciences, transportation, logistics, but I would also add, I think energy is another place we may be able to really leverage in that. So we're beginning to have those conversations again around these particular legs of the stool with those partners. But it has to be something that people see value in. We can't force a new thing or a new organization. So we're going to have to step carefully through that so people really want to be part of it and see value in what we create in terms of that identity.
Thank you. And so shifting from this large valued institutional asset that CBG is to the entrepreneurial side of this, Dave Knox, who leads BlueNorth, you see so many different ideas and industries and things like that. What's it about to you, as Janet presented her research?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that really stood out was the interconnectedness of those industries. And so often when we look at these, we want to think of an industry as a silo that kind of sits there. But I'll use an example. Before I took this role, I had owned a small consumer packaged goods company that was in personal health care. And with that business, we needed our manufacturer that had all of those specialized skills, because I'm dealing with an FDA product that has to be tested down to a laboratory of 0.1%. I had to do the logistics, the warehousing, where it was going to store, where we're going to do with it. But then most importantly was that wholesale trade. And one of the things I took as note when Jan was talking was, we think about the Cintases and the Hillmans, they're based here, but what probably is a really big driver of that is actually the customer teams. Because if you're going to sell to Krauter, you have to have a presence. So I do an event every year that we have General Mills and PepsiCo and Kimberly-Clark and down that list. Those people all live here. They don't live in the other places where those companies are headquartered because they have to have a presence to sell to Krauter. What's interesting is when you look at that, most of those offices are in Mason and Blue Ash. Yet they're calling on Krauter that is pretty close to where we sit right now. Why are we not really embrace that from a Northern Kentucky side, et cetera? So that was one that jumped out because I deal with those sales guys every day. How do we embrace that? And then how do we use that for entrepreneurship as well?
Very good. And so as you think about the corridor of commerce and that cross-market collaboration, how do you create success from an entrepreneurial standpoint?
Yeah, it's, I think, taking a long-term view and use the words of our mutual friend Chad Summy that, the math is the math. And, one of our companies, for instance, is a company called Brightpick. Brightpick is an Eastern European company that looked at a global map of where should the company be for U.S. presence. They had no loyalty. None of us talked to them. None of us pitched them. They did the math of where their customer base was, because their customer base, they're doing robotic 3PLs. So the robots that go through warehouses and pick out the items, etc. The math is massively in our favor. Most people would be jumping at the chance to have math actually in their favor versus having to create fancy marketing campaigns to justify it. We need to brag about that. We need to show up at the places and tout what we have, because that's what's going to take to win and attract these people and bring in more entrepreneurs, not just homegrown.
Excellent point. And so Janet, anything to round out these comments on this topic?
I think the big thing that struck me is without doing the research, there's industries that just fly under the radar and you don't hear about them. And as long as we're doing the research and we think about them and realize how important they are into that entire supply chain. So if anybody had asked me what are the major industries that are really important to our region, wholesale trade would not have been top of mind. So I think that it just demonstrates that there's industries out there that we need to really understand their needs and their role that they play in the larger economy.
So shifting a little bit to specific industry impacts, talent is always talked about as a bottleneck. We put a lot of efforts into our workforce needs. And as we look at sectors like manufacturing, we have those strong multipliers as well as life sciences. Dave, what are your thoughts on how to sustain this, how to bring the talent here? You talked a little bit about the entrepreneurial side. How do we buy that and capture it?
So when I think about the captive workforce and the talent side, I think a lot of our efforts are always around the base, because we're thinking about the breadth of the jobs that need to be created, which they're vital. Like that's what we need for the community. But I like to think more about the tip of that pyramid. And how do we think about those job creators and those salaries, those people that are the 100,000 plus, then the value is not just in their salary, it's in that's executive talent that chances are could leave and do something to create something. And so how do we really focus on that and leverage those to make them really embrace a community? Let's take on that wholesale trade. I think if you actually really dive into the individuals, a lot of those are jobs that the job is here, but the person actually changes every 2 years. Because, for instance, I went to Arkansas for 2 years to run our personal healthcare business at Krauter. I knew I was there for tour duty and I wasn't going to be staying there. But I had at least 3 of my colleagues that went thinking it was a tour duty and they fell in love with the area and stayed. And so every one of those folks that come in for that job is a chance we can stick them. And a lot of those are going to become job creators because that's who they are. When you find builders, they want to build. And so how do we embrace them and leverage that a little bit more? So I think not just about those jobs, but I actually think about the individuals, because a great individual is going to create 50, 100, 1,000 jobs if we give them the opportunity to do that.
Great. And so Larry, you're running a large effort, a large institutional asset. As you look at scaling this, what are your thoughts on expanding your cluster? And I think as part of your discussion, talk a little bit about the challenges you're seeing in the workforce pipeline, because I think that coincides.
Thank you, Karen. Absolutely. Just like everyone else, we are looking for certain types of skill sets across the spectrum, everything from electricians to engineers. And we have involved ourselves in the workforce environment. We just held a workforce development summit last week at CBG. We brought over 50 educators in Kentucky, Ohio, and Indiana to learn all about potential career paths in aviation so that they can go back into their schools, particularly at the middle school and high school level, and begin to talk to students about what opportunities that there are, and that there are a number of different opportunities for them that require different types of training. And it's not just about having to go to the 4-year degree granting institutions or advanced degrees, but there are a lot of opportunities in trades. There are a lot of opportunities in what we would call intermediate skilled areas. And at this summit, we brought a number of tenants of the airport and partners of the airport, such as Team Aero, L2 Aviation, Epic Flight Academy, Cincinnati State, Gateway Community College, Atlas Air, and Amazon Air, all together to discuss how we can open up pathways to raise awareness at the student level to get them into the process earlier. And it's really interesting, Karen. I've even had students reach out to me on LinkedIn saying, I would like to go and become an airframe and power plant mechanic. Can you help me figure out how to do that? So I think there is an interest out there. We've got to do a better job of getting to them earlier. And I think back to the points made about once we get someone here, to me, what Janet's research reveals, to me, I think is a real strength in our value proposition, is that we can take someone in who is maybe lesser skilled and put them on a continuum to upskill over time in our region. And we have the infrastructure to do that, and I think, again, putting that into play, we will move people up the economic ladder and also help ourselves by retaining those people in the region and then working with them to upskill them through various means and methods in the education system.
So Janet, noting that the workforce analysis is likely next on your list, what are the types of things that business, government, and education, how can those groups collaborate to solve some of this?
So I think the thing that all the educational institutions would tell you is it is very difficult for us to move at the speed of business. If you're talking about a bachelor's degree, it takes 4 years to train that student. Even our short-term certificates might take 12 to 18 months. So one of the things we really want to build out is a robust information loop that's a continuous loop between industry educators and then the students that are looking for opportunities for career growth. Because particularly with the advent of AI, the job requirements, the skill requirements for traditional occupations are changing so rapidly, and we don't always, in an education institution, we don't always hear about it soon enough. So I think, Dr. Figueroa's nodding at me that I'm correct, so it makes me feel better. But I think that's the big challenge for us as a region, is to make sure that this is an industry that informs the educational institutions quickly and robustly about what they actually need.
So shifting a little bit to public policy, and I know both Dave and Larry had extensive experience in working in this area. You know, when you think about accelerating that cluster development outside of what Janet just touched on, where do you see public policy coming into play? What are the types of things that we can be looking for in terms of policy or infrastructure improvement that would help our efforts?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big, hairy question in a lot of different ways. You know, I'll start just on the entrepreneurship side of things. You know, policy is an interesting balance of how do we remove the constraints for experimentation while also keeping the safety that needs to exist, which is a balancing act. You know, I'll use the example that we had a really cool startup that was playing in the ramjet thruster space, so pure in aeronautics. And they're like, we have to leave for a year. Well, why do we need to leave? Like, we've got Wright Patterson, we've got all this. They said, well, technically we're classified as a bomb because of the FAA. So we actually have to go down and we can fly over the Gulf of Mexico in case we explode. Like, yeah, that's good. We need policy to make sure that you don't explode around here. But how do you have that balance and that push for that experimentation, that drive, and loosen the reins in a certain way so we can get that, and also do that balancing that is the job of policy at times to protect as well. And that's a murky line that's going to constantly be changing and evolving, but we need to recognize, at least in entrepreneurship, we can't have it just be black and white. We need to leave some room for that experimentation and make us the most welcoming state to do that.
Larry?
Just to add on to Dave's observations, I think as I was reflecting on this, back to Janet's point about the speed at which the academic world moves, I think we need to think about turning the tables a little bit, and business needs to engage more and actually fund what they need with the education professionals, advising them on how they can develop training programs, curriculum, all those things to get to where they need to be. And I think that approach could be very fruitful for our region ultimately. And I'm not saying that it happens at the exclusion of other things, because one of the other points that I was thinking about was that we really do need robotics research in our area around advanced manufacturing and automation. I think that's very important and something that we need to really go after much more aggressively. I would love to see a transportation logistics degree program in our community, both at an undergrad and grad level. I think that would be very important. But you may have heard recently with the Leadership Center Frohmeyer that the legislature has created a task force focused on advanced air mobility and aviation economic development. And along those lines, questions being asked are, how can we educate our workforce to take jobs in aviation, like air traffic controllers, which we all know is a very well-publicized shortage right now. Finally, kind of along the lines of turning the tables, the FAA has finally decided that they need to partner with universities to teach the basic air traffic control curriculum through programs at schools. They call them, there's advanced and basic CTI programs. And a student in a basic CTI program can basically skip the first half of the FAA Academy in Oklahoma City for controllers. The advanced students can skip it all. And that's going to produce a much better result than trying to force fit all potential ATC candidates through the FAA Academy in Oklahoma City. So that model is changing, and I think that we need to look at opportunities, because the closest basic CTI program, I think, is at Kent State. The advanced programs are, I think the closest are in New York and Georgia. So the point is, I think we need to engage business more, and business needs to maybe lead a little bit more with the academic piece being more of an advisory role of here's how you need to go about this in order to get to where you want to go to train the workforce at a speed that the academic world may not be able to maintain. And the investment piece, of course, is very important back to the academic.
And so both you and Dave have touched on that untapped potential as we look across the sectors, distribution, driving logistics, driving manufacturing, life sciences, supporting real estate. Jan, anything to add from that perspective in terms of how can we collaborate? How can we fill these gaps?
I'll just,
So, the first thing I'll say is I used to live in the Spirit Aerosystems flight plan, so I appreciate regulations on aircraft. But yeah, I think the important thing is to understand how these industries feeding into each other, and that you can't have a robust manufacturing sector without all the other support services they need around it. But it's also a symbiotic relationship. If you think about the manufacturing space, these are the employees that have health insurance that support St. Elizabeth, that allow St. Elizabeth to also provide indigent care for the people in our community who need help. So this is very much a virtuous, we are all in this together. We have to succeed as a group. We can't silo and just pick out winners and losers. But there are certain categories that are gonna lift everybody out. And that's what these industry clusters are highlighting.
And it certainly represents our new phase of growth as you think about that. And so before we open it up for questions, if each of the panelists can just reflect on, when we reconvene in 5 years, what type of progress would you most like to have seen? And what is the one thing that your organization can take on or maybe taking on now to help move this strategy forward?
Okay, so start on so we think the short term and the long term. I was doing an analysis of the 11 of the 25 companies that Janet called out for the Venture Act. The average time those startups were started was 2010, 2011. Life science is a long-term bet, and we've got a massive thing going with Life Sci KY that's gonna put us in place for that. We're gonna see the beginnings of that impact in 5 years, but it's gonna be 10 to 15 years when you really see that paying off in a big, big way. This community needs to see things happen sooner than that as well. So we need to think with this portfolio strategy of the short term and the long term and how we balance between the two of them. So the one thing I'd love to see us really push on is, Karen, you spent a lot of time in the talent recruitment world for a long time. We need to treat talent and business the same way we treat attracting athletes. And how do we go out and get the best in the industries to come and call this region home? Because those will be the accelerants. Those will be the drivers to really push us. So that's one that, it's one of the underlying reasons why we've helped build Spark House through BlueNorth is you have to have a beacon that attracts. We want that to be the beacon that attracts some of our best talent to come back and to realize the companies here, the jobs, the opportunities. Because we've got not just, Kentucky sons and daughters that want to come back home, but we have others that see the potential of this region as an amplifier for their career. But we need those beacons to show, and then we need to go out and recruit those 5-star athletes that are business leaders to come here and call this place home.
Well said. Larry?
I think we have a lot of tools in the toolkit. We have a lot of different types of organizations on the oars across workforce development, economic development, and our sectors that Janet has identified. And I think we need to try to coordinate those efforts better and use special districts to the maximum extent possible, and that includes foreign trade zone. I think that the foreign trade zone is something that we really need to look at in terms of our value proposition in the global economy, particularly around aerospace, transportation, and logistics. As you know, we have been dealing with a challenge to bring sustainable aviation fuel, so CBG. And largely, you know, as we're talking through that, it's a math problem in part, and but what I'm trying to do and trying to begin that process of addressing this with elected officials, economic development professionals, and the business community is that it is the price of doing business on an international scale. This comes with foreign direct investment coming into our state. And so we have to solve this. And so for me, solving the sustainable aviation fuel issue as it relates to our ability to sustain and attract international passenger and cargo service is going to continue to be important, because obviously that's an enabler for a number of things that we've talked about here today. I think that we have a global logistics park, and one of the things that we have identified as a gap, and I'd like to see done the next time we convene in several years, is a very high-tech, temperature-controlled airfield warehouse that's functioning around delivering some of these types of temperature-sensitive goods, whether that's life science or some other type of area. It's a capability that we need to have. Advanced air mobility platforms now are being utilized in the region. However, we need to become more aggressive in taking the next step to figure out cargo delivery within the region by UAS. And I think also when we reconvene, I'm hopeful that we will also be thinking about how we're addressing some of the roadway capacity issues, particularly on I-71. And obviously the bridges are going to be a really important step in that direction, but I don't think we'll finish there. And I want to make sure we keep the drumbeat going with our transportation cabinet and others to make sure, and federal highways, to make sure that we're addressing that issue is very important. And then I think finally, just, we will, ideally, the next time we reconvene in 5 years and talk about this, we will have a very significant regional brand established that has been able to advance a very significant value proposition out in the global economy and bring more business to this area across these industry sectors that are our strengths.
Very great, tangible ideas right there. Thank you. Janet, thoughts?
I think that Larry touched on it earlier, but I think the best thing we could do from a talent perspective is that we can really build out those robust partnerships between industry and education. We know that with AI implementation and the change in automation, that the skills our employees need are going to change very, very rapidly. And we need that partnership with business and industry to help us be the educators you need in order for your companies to succeed in our region.
So those are the closing thoughts. We'd like to open it up for questions. And Senator Krauter, I know you had a question, so if you don't mind kicking us off, that would be great.
Sure. I get so passionate around this that just from the entrepreneurial, get it started, so much to surround what's happening in aviation and aeronautics. This last legislative session, yes, we were able to form the task force. You articulated quite clearly, Candace, but you and Seth articulated quite clearly that we needed that, and the task force was formed, and then you knocked it out of the park on Monday. Several legislators let me know that. As we, the first foundational question that I was going to ask Janet, when we're in Frankfurt, very quickly, when we talk about the Cincinnati MSA, people's ears close. So I think we have to thoughtfully recognize our region without saying Cincinnati. Yet, we're part of the Cincinnati MSA. So I'm challenging back to you that we've got to say this differently. Frankfurt can't hear you. They can't hear you, and that doesn't help, but yet we had a lot of legislators here, and Dave Knox knocked it out of the park. So that's so important that people understand that Northern Kentucky is not Cincinnati. The flip side of that is, population-wise, when you're talking about the Cincinnati MSA, how many of those population members are in Kentucky, and how many are in Cincinnati? That's a direct question, then I have another follow-up.
I can't tell you off the top of my head what the exact split is, but I can tell you that most of the growth is happening, population-wise, is happening outside of Hamilton County. So Boone is one of the fastest growing in terms of population. But one of the economic development people could probably tell me better than I. What's the percentage of rural Kentucky for the metro area? Do you know, Jennifer?
407,000.
So Brett Cooper said 450,000 in Northern Kentucky and 2.3 million in Ohio.
Well, in the entire MSA.
Entire MSA.
Our MSA is 2.3.
Okay, so 1.9 in Ohio and
Yeah.
about 100.
But the other thing you have to realize, it's not all about population. We're talking about state revenues. What they care about is where's that money being generated from a property tax and income and profits perspective, because that's what they tax. And so like the airport complex, obviously it serves the entire region, but all those tax dollars flow to Frankfurt.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those numbers.
Yes, I bet you do.
Well, I have to reiterate those numbers. Brent is great about repeating, and you'll have to help me with my, my sizzle, to always be repeating those numbers as we're leading into a budget cycle. And that's my next point, that January is our budget cycle, but between now and January is when we justify why we're going to make any investment dollars into Northern Kentucky. So I do invite more conversation around these specific financial asks that we have for the Kentucky legislature to invest in some of the great strategies that we have underway in Northern Kentucky. I've got a request already, Larry, for a deeper dive so that we can meet with a few chair folks and then get our key talking points ready and then get in front of the right committees between now and the 1st of December, because we really only have August, September, October, November. So we only have 4 months. I feel a lot of pressure.
Other questions? Fernandez?
So a lot of the conversations over the last couple of years in Northern Kentucky has been really talking about how we're an international city and we just don't know. And so what I'm hearing again is the economic advantage that we're looking at is playing on the stage of an international stage. How do you guys feel or assess the changes that are going to be needed in Northern Kentucky to actually be a player in that space? Because if one of those factors of transportation, logistics, and the math works against us, we're out of here.
Great question, and I think you framed it really well, which is we are playing on that stage, and we have to if we're going to succeed. And I think back to a couple of the comments I made is really figuring out what we need to go after out there in the global economy. What makes sense to bring here? What makes sense to go hunting for? And let's spend all of our time and energy focused on those things and not distraction with other bright, shiny things that people may think we should go after. And I think the other piece of that is really figuring out how to leverage the foreign trade zone, as I mentioned, and solving other types of problems that may not appear in our domestic agenda at a state level or federal level, but are important to international businesses and back to sustainable aviation fuel as an example. And, you know, again, that comes with the price of doing business internationally, along with other things as well. And so from that perspective, I think that when we begin to elevate our presence at some of the, in and around the aerospace and aviation sector, at some of these trade shows. I think what's going to happen is we're going to get a lot of intel on the types of things that these international businesses are looking for in our region. And we will obviously iterate through all of that and begin to come back to the community, back to our legislators and others saying, here's what the international businesses that we're trying to recruit into our region need, and how can we deliver that, whether it's education, whether it's infrastructure. I do think there's an awful lot to be said about how we recruit and nurture entrepreneurs across these industry sectors that Janet has identified, as well as, again, bolstering our academic framework to train folks to be ready for these opportunities.
And Larry, I would just add, we need to look through a different lens sometimes, and I think that's the basis of the corridor concept. We have international talent here, we have international companies here. How are we supporting them? And so I think it's that lens that we need to put on as community leaders in terms of how to take care and support of the talent that's already here. The companies, the international companies that are already here. Why is that talent here? I think we've got a nucleus to build on.
Yeah. The other thing I'd toss in there is we have to have a mindset of leading, not just participating. So, take over the last decade in the entrepreneurship world, you have things like South by Southwest and CES, you have the equivalent of the Paris Air Show. You'll have a city that will, or a region will say, well, let's go participate at that. Let's go send people. Let's tell them about. The entrepreneurs don't care. They don't want you participating and just showing up at it. They want you taking a leadership role there and being proud of what you're doing and kind of taking that, this is what we're special. A good example that we use in our ecosystems, we have an event we hold every year called Brand Fusion that brings entrepreneurs and brands together from across the US. Last year, 60% of the brands that participated were outside of our region. 95% were out of the startups were outside of our region. And it would be easy to say, well, shouldn't you just support the local startups and once they're here? But what we want to do is lead and show why the best companies in the world should be here and be lucky to be part of our ecosystem versus us just participating. So sometimes we're really bad at the Midwest nice, et cetera, of we don't brag enough, we don't take that thing and we are the leaders, let's act like it, not just participate in the things, but lead in the things.
Very good. Other questions?
Janet, is your PowerPoint going to be,
Will the PowerPoint be shared?
Yes.
thank you.
We're gonna email it all, the full presentation to everyone later today. And so you'll get a full copy of it. And feel free to copy, share, cut and paste it at will. Enjoy yourself.
Larry, I have a question from you on housing. I actually hopefully got this right last week, but I was talking about the growth in Boone County and how important it is that the airport continues to grow and thrive. And I brought up the idea of housing in that conversation. I shared that I think it's 40% of those that work in and around the airport don't actually live in the state of Kentucky. And I was talking about if they had more housing options, we can attract more people and grow this thing. And the folks that are anti-growth, they seem to, I know they hate traffic, like we all don't hate traffic, right? Hate traffic, but they sure love low taxes. They love getting their Amazon delivery the same day sometimes, right? And so they love a lot of the benefits. They love the low-cost flights. How do we find a way to message that and also so we can build more housing and kind of combat some of the anti-growth messages that we hear in this community?
Well, workforce housing is obviously part of the formula that we have to figure out in order to succeed. And it's really a balancing act because we have to be very careful about where we cite it. We recently had to object to a zone change that was being sought near the airport for residential, an industrial property that was, the owner was asking for the rezone of residential to build about 64 condominium types homes. And It was just in an area that was just too close to the airport. And we've also had a few of those types of situations all around the airport, which concerns me very much, because we really need to be able to operate in an unconstrained way. That is, I think, going to be one of the challenges on the go forward is where do we site this? Where is the infrastructure at to support it? And is it in conflict with the growth of the airport over time? So it's a balancing act. I've had those conversations with Judge Moore. You know, at the same time though, we have to be leaning into that conversation. We just can't say no to everything, right? And say, no, it just can't go anywhere within, 2-mile radius of CDG. We've got to be precise about it, and we have to be part of the solution as opposed to just saying no to growth of that type in and around the airport. But it's a true razor's edge on that that we have to walk to make sure that we don't tip over in the wrong direction and begin to have issues with people who are agitating against airport operations, and particularly at night.
Thank you. And so the point of entry to get involved in Northern Kentucky is pretty easy. The Chamber holds regular programming related to things that touch our community. You can check their website, see an eggs and issues, special programming, etc. The Horizon Fund is holding a philanthropic seminar symposium. Janet will be featured as part of that on September 25th. We do our OneNKY Summit. It's our annual, our 8th. Will be focused on the community roadmap, October 22nd. There are a ton of ways to get engaged. Just check the website, contact one of us, we will plug you in. So we hope to see you at one of those. And I will now turn it over to Janet to close out the program. Thank you, panelists.
Well, again, I want to thank Karen for moderating our panel discussion and for Dave and Larry for participating this morning. When Larry said he came in early, he was talking 2 a.m. So he came in on a flight at 2 a.m. and we got here this morning. So we really appreciated that. I want to again thank everyone for coming. The PowerPoints will be delivered out to you via email. The QR code on the screen, which will also be emailed to you. We would really appreciate it if you could fill out an evaluation and tell us what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see next year. And again, thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.